Thank you so much, everybody. It's so lovely to see all your faces here today. And this is honestly one of my favorite topics in the world to talk about, so I'm also going to try to contain my excitement. But really, I wanted to kick off the day here to talk about love, which is right here in the title of the conference. And really, this is a love story. I say the words emotional connection here, but that's really what I'm talking about, is this type of obsessive, connected, defensive, protective love that the type of users that Notion was able to attract had for this brand. And I'm not going to try to suggest that you can boil this all down to mechanics or that there's sort of a tactical step-by-step way to achieve this type of emotional response from people. But I do think that I observed a few trends, a few things about the psychology of our users that might lend themselves to each of you working on brands and helping form those bonds yourself. So starting with, Maya did a great job talking about who I am. Thank you, very, very kind. And then the bulk of what I tell you today is going to be drawn from my experience at Notion. There's a couple of Notinos here today that I'm so excited to see in the audience, just given the strength of this experience. So I'm going to try to, and I know this is a big effort, but boil down this huge, nebulous, somewhat daunting topic to 4 different movements when you're thinking about building a brand that can be truly beloved. And the first one is self-expression, which is not something that comes up for a lot of people, and it really does depend on the brand that you're working on. You might think to yourself, well, I'm helping build a brand for a B2B tool. How can I possibly help people self-express with that? But when we did talk to so many users about what it was that really got to their core and made Notion a part of their lives, it was that they felt that what they built with the tool represented who they were on an incredibly deep level. And I will say that I think most of the tools that are coming out in technology that are being built today do have this opportunity. So what does enabling self-expression look like? First of all, this is going without saying. I'm going to spend like a second on the slide, but people want to share who they are. Like, just given the sheer number of tools out there that make this possible, it is very clear that there is just like a deep innate human desire to express what is important to you. So what does it mean to share who you are? Online, I will say, and of course this cannot be like, it's very reductive to be like people boil down to these types of components, but online, when you are sharing who it is that you are, it really does come down to what you know, what you like, and then I will say what you make. And can you help people make something that captures both what they like and what they know? So the way that Notion did it, first of all, here's an example of 2 brands that have done a really good job with this. Yelp, of course, all these people volunteering for free to review things that they like, blending itself to this huge SEO juggernaut for Yelp. And then Reddit, of course, just had this blockbuster IPO. They're doing very well. And it's all about people sharing for free what it is that they know. So clearly, these are drives that we have. For Notion, this really did get funneled into templates. People building Notion setups for themselves. So as Maya described, it is a docs, productivity, project management, wiki tool, all those things. But really, it is a canvas upon which you can combine a lot of different types of content in order to build your own tools, in order to build your own interface. And people would create these things and then want other people to use them. So we built them a gallery where they could submit these things and other people could discover them and then give them compliments and share them on social. And that type of feedback was this beautiful virtuous loop. So you can see a few examples of here, like what people like, what people know, and how templates captured that for them. People would make big lists of movies and television shows. We had one big database of all of the Pokemon that this one particular person loved, shared thousands and thousands of times. And then also bundles of templates around how to build a company using Notion. So I would ask, like, as you're thinking about your brand, what you have available to you that could help people self-express. And really, truly, people like to say, hey, look at how organized I am. Look at the methodology that I use for this. Look at how I'm a helpful manager to people. If you can think of something that's shareable, and I say tangibly here in quotes because it's mostly all digital, then you really do have something on your hands, like an atomic unit of something that might help people feel this need and this desire to self-express with your tool. And just to give you an example, I think when we think about tools that help us self-express, these are the ones that come up very clearly. They're creator tools. They are things that allow people to make beautiful things. But if you really think about all of the successful companies out there, they've all figured out a way to do this. So LangChain, GitHub, Salesforce, all of them have come up with their own version of either templates or something that people can snapshot and say, hey, here is how I'm using this, and this is what it says about me. So number 2, aspiration. And this is something that I think, given that we're all fairly, knowledgeable about brand marketing, this is something that comes up a lot. But what are the actual components of creating a brand that feels aspirational, that feels like it is projecting something that people want to become, want to embody? So brand, and I've said this in a lot of places, so I apologize if you've already heard me say it before, brand is helping people feel, and that is usually where things stop a lot for a lot of brands, where it's like, oh yeah, we're supposed to make people feel a certain way about our brand. But it's really about helping people feel the way they want to feel about themselves. Can you help them feel like they are tremendously productive, like they are the most knowledgeable person on their team, like they're a good parent who is using the tool that helps them work the fastest so that they can get home for dinner on time? Like, I really think like expanding our definition of this and understanding where your tool can sit in people's lives makes a big difference. So these are all the things that I thought of, but there's obviously like a world more adjectives that you can help people feel with your brand based on the stories that you tell them, how you help them use your particular product. But these are all things that people want to be, and more importantly, they want other people to see them as such. And I think we forget about things like ethical, empathetic, feeling beloved, like all of that content that you give people can help capture that. So the 3 components that I would like to suggest as the basis for aspirational brand are capability, beauty, and recognition. Capability is helping people do well with your product, feel like they are doing an incredible job as one of your users, that they're maximizing what they're getting out of it and what they're able to do with it in a way that makes other people envy and admire the way that they're doing it. So the way that Notion thought about this was creating a tremendous amount of user education. I have a snapshot here of Notion Academy, which was a very time and labor-intensive project that produced all of this. Here, if you want to do this with Notion, here is exactly how you do it. And it really did make people feel a lot more capable with the tool. Beyond that, we worked with a number of influencers. This one, Thomas Frank, gets millions of views on his product, or on his videos, all explaining how people can follow his lead and do what he does with Notion. So that's even better, I think, activating your users who people can relate to so they understand the benefit that it's created for others, and then they can aspire to be like some of these folks. One of my favorite examples, which is a little bit offbeat for this one, who remembers the Dear Sophie or the Paris Google ad where it was all the interface within Google? Really beautiful. I challenge anybody here to watch it without crying. But really, they were teaching you how to use Google well in the shape of an emotional and evocative story. So developing people's capability can take lots of different shapes. Second, I will make this argument. Beauty is a killer feature. And I say this to some people who say that it lands a little superficial, that obviously functionality and utility trumps the looks and feel of things. But I really would argue against that. One thing that we saw at Notion, because our second most popular market was South Korea, where there were hundreds of thousands of people using it, far outpacing some of the markets we would have presupposed, I got on the phone and talked to a lot of the folks who were leading the charge and our influencers in that geography, and they all said, first, without any fail, that it was the beauty of the tool that made it that way in South Korea. And we saw that then replicate itself across so many other international geographies. And if you really think about it, when you think about category killers, category leaders, especially folks who have really thrived in crowded categories, They are the ones that have prioritized design, prioritized delight. And I would say that that is something to keep squarely in mind, particularly now when people's expectations are higher than ever. And then lastly, recognition. You want people to know that what they're putting out there is actually getting noticed. And you want them to see and feel that recognition. So the more you can give them status symbols, like here's one from GitHub, and here's one from Gumroad, the 6,000 copies of this, the more you can do that, the better. Community, I would say, is the other big one. Putting people in a community of their peers where they feel recognized, where they feel like they relate to the bulk of the people who are in the room with them, and they can share things very freely, very casually, very comfortably, and have those people reflect back to them that they really admire. They want to build like them. They want to know how they did it. And I know community, depending on the form factor, is not right for every brand. Sometimes it takes the shape of an ambassador program like Notions did. Sometimes it takes the shape of a very small customer advisory board. But I think the dynamics for both are very similar. If you'd like to talk more about community, I'll be around all day. But there's a big story to be told there. I don't have time for it all. The third one is consistency. So when we think about consistency for a product, we often think of things like uptime, SLAs on customer experience tickets, making sure that refunds land on time accurately, making sure that you adhere to the terms of service by which you're delivering all of this goodness. But you should think on the brand side about a number of other things being consistent. You want to make sure that there's consistent communication. And that's really what this all falls into, making sure that you are regularly touching people's lives in the ways that matter to them. So making sure that the timing lines up with what they value at the right moment. So email, social, obviously. We have Alex in the audience who ran social for Notion for the longest time and did a brilliant job. And it really was about regularity, but also making sure that every single post contained value. It wasn't just posting for the sake of posting. It was posting to tell stories that were going to help people or touch people's lives. Community, you want people to be actively engaging within your community. I see a lot of ghost towns out there because a lot of people have been invited into community spaces and then nobody really knows who's there, so they don't really want to say anything. Keeping things small, growing things thoughtfully, thinking about how to keep those really engaged makes a big difference for this consistent feeling of being sort of surround sounded by your brand. And then I will also say tone and values, which are a little bit less tangible, but your tone of voice. It's so important to have chosen a way that you speak to people. And maybe you have various voices that come from various individuals inside your org, but the org itself should feel like a friend that people know and recognize based on the way that you talk to them in all the language across all your marketing surfaces. And then your values. Your customers should feel your values through all of these various expressions, and they should not change radically. They should trust that they know who you are and what you stand for. So a few examples from Notion. When we were welcomed back to the office in New Year's 2021, we were met by a 4-hour outage, which was a pretty hard day. It was like not the best day of my life. And the way that we tried to tackle this was immediately getting on social, saying like, hey, here's what's happening. We know it's happening. We've got the best people on it. And then every hour on the hour, even though we hadn't fixed it and we were really concerned that people were going to get madder and madder and madder, still saying like, hey, it's still in process. We're still figuring it out. Don't worry about it. And that type of transparency, consistency, actually led to this very strange and remarkable phenomenon where people started replying and tweeting themselves, hey, Notion's having a really hard day and they're trying really hard. So like, you know, hashtag Notion hugs. And we were like flabbergasted by this, but we think it's because they saw that we were in fact putting in a lot of effort and we weren't hiding it behind trying to make the brand look like something else. And then after that, we posted this in Notion, posted this blog post from Ivan directly. You can see that it starts in the first person. I want to write to you directly. And really went into a ton of technical detail and a ton of emotional detail about what that experience had been like so that people could trust us going forward that it wasn't going to happen again. So when you think about consistency, here are the things that I would bring up for you. Can you be more transparent than people think you are going to be? Can you be more responsive than they think you're going to be? And do it as needed. Don't necessarily be in people's faces, be in people's inboxes all the time, but really be thoughtful about when they want to hear from you based on the experience they want to have. And then trustworthy, and I would say that that's the most important one. It is different for every customer what that means, but I think trustworthy is a universal value that we all share. And then my last component here of building a beloved brand that can inspire this type of obsession is novelty. And this is also something that people don't normally think about, but the relationship that your brand has with its users needs to constantly grow. It has to change. Just like relationships we have with people in our lives. Like, it can't just stay stagnant, like, oh, we're best friends and that's it. You know, we have the same connection the whole time. Things do have to change and fluctuate. So here are some suggestions I have for, from the beginning of a company's life, sort of all the way sort of through this early stage. You want to maximize learning at the outset, make sure people feel that capability we talked about. Pilot programs before you actually adopt them so you can get people's feedback and make them feel listened to. Test and iterate and keep them informed about how you are testing and iterating. Don't just do it behind the scenes. Make them feel like they're sort of on the journey with you. Figure out the ways to deepen their engagement. Like, what are other hooks? And I'll show you on the next slide some examples true to life at Notion. And then can you personalize what it is that you're doing that you have tested and figured out that worked so that they feel like they're constantly getting to know you better as you get to know them better. So here's how we thought about it with Notion's community. We started with the Notion pros very, very early on. It was the 20 people who were the most vocal, even when they were mean to us. We invited them into a Slack community and asked them a ton of questions. Why are you here? Why do you love this thing so much? What do you want to do with us? What type of access do you want to the team? All of that, tried to maximize our learning. And then we piloted some programs. We piloted in-person events, said, we'll buy the pizza if you want to host something in Berlin. And suddenly we had, 5, 10, 15 in-person events happening month to month. Influencer came out of this willingness to experiment. So realizing that some of our community members were in fact going on YouTube making a bunch of noise, we got in touch with them and said, why are you doing this and how do we replicate you across the board? And that turned out to be one of the most successful marketing programs for Notion over time. And then also starting to realize that these people wanted to do other things. They wanted to build their own businesses, helping other teams learn how to use Notion well. They wanted to teach courses on Coursera about how to use Notion well. They wanted to, inside of their companies, run their own webinars to get people to be more engaged, and so Notion could expand within their companies. So we ended up launching a consultants program, a community just for champions within our customer companies that customer success could go into and really support in a different way. And then the most recent incarnation of this, as far as I know, is the Campus Leaders Program. Even though students, and this is just like a brand tip, this is not necessarily related to the topic, but students are high churn and low revenue, but they certainly are the loudest people on the planet. So don't disregard them. If there's any way you can get students involved, they will shout your brand from the rooftops, and they're really, really fun to work with. So if you think about like the Notion development of how you use the product, not just how the community developed, but like here's an example of how we might get somebody to deepen their engagement with the product. Like first, you sign up, we want you to create a page. Now we want you to invite a teammate. Why don't you download our mobile and desktop apps? And then eventually we want you to join this really vibrant community so that you become one of these people who is constantly amplifying Notion on our behalf by truly sharing your work and getting the recognition that you deserve. So I'll leave you with this thought that altogether, everything that I shared here today, it's really important to keep growing with your users, and you always need to be thinking about giving them new experiences and new ways to connect. And if you do that, they will feel that love that really does carry your brand through in all kinds of exceptional ways. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.